The night glittered like 1,000 fractured dreams above Manhattan, neon spilling across the streets in streams of color as taxis splashed through the rain. On the corner of West 45th, the Golden Ember Lounge glowed with a warmth that promised jazz music, whiskey neat, and people who wore their ambitions like tailored coats. It was the kind of place where the powerful closed deals between champagne toasts and the lonely stared too long into crystal glasses. Adrian Cole had grown up surrounded by this world, the son of Victor Cole, real estate tycoon, name stamped in gold letters across half the skyline. Born into a life of private schools and polished marble, he carried the confidence of someone who never had to question whether doors would open. Yet lately he felt something hollow behind all that privilege, like music heard through a wall, beautiful but distant, missing the pulse that made it alive. He told himself he came here tonight to meet an investor his father insisted he entertain, but the truth was, Adrian hated these evenings, the practiced smiles, the hollow laughter, the girls who looked at him like a promise wrapped in dollar bills. So when he saw her standing behind the bar in a black dress with sleeves rolled up, hair pulled into a messy knot, face flushed from the heat of the espresso machines, something in him stilled. She didn't belong to this world. That much was clear. She moved like she had places to be, people depending on her, no time for nonsense. The name tag said Sophia, letters engraved in cheap plastic. She carried herself with a quiet defiance, as if daring life to throw one more thing her way so she could handle it and keep going. Adrian ordered something he didn't even care to drink just to keep her near. "Busy night?" he asked, watching her slide a glass across the counter with a precision born of exhaustion and muscle memory. "Always," she said without looking up, voice low but firm, like someone who had learned not to waste words. He smiled faintly. Most women he met leaned in, giggled, touched his sleeve when they talked. Sophia didn't even glance at him twice. It was refreshing, infuriating. 2 minutes passed. The investor arrived, all cologne and loud opinions, and Adrian went through the motions: handshakes, polite laughter, promises to call. But his gaze kept drifting to the bar, to the girl with the tired eyes who didn't once look his way. When the investor finally left, Adrian found himself walking back to her. He didn't plan it. Something about her felt like a challenge he hadn't faced before. "Do you ever smile?" he asked, leaning on the counter. "Or is that against company policy?" She raised an eyebrow, finally meeting his gaze. Her eyes were dark, steady, the kind that saw right through polished suits and trust fund charm. "Do you always interrupt people at work?" she said evenly. "Or is that against yours?" He laughed, surprised. No one talked to him like this. Not business partners, not women at charity galas, not even friends who knew his last name carried weight in this city. "What time do you finish?" he asked before he could stop himself. Sophia shook her head, not unkindly. "Long after you're gone." The conversation ended there. She moved on to other customers, leaving him standing with a drink he didn't want and a strange restlessness in his chest. Adrian told himself to forget it. She was a waitress. He was who he was. Their worlds touched for seconds, nothing more. He left the lounge, rain soaking the edges of his expensive coat as he stepped into the night. But fate has a way of circling back when you least expect it. 2 hours later, walking down a nearly empty street, Adrian heard voices, angry, sharp. Then he saw her, Sophia, outside a small convenience store, backpack slung over one shoulder, cornered by 2 men whose smiles carried the wrong kind of intention. Adrian didn't think. "Hey." His voice cut through the air, sharper than he felt. The men turned. City light caught the knife in one's hand, the threat curling off him like smoke. Adrian wasn't reckless. He'd never been in a real fight in his life, but something about seeing her precede against cold bricks stripped away hesitation. "Back off," he said, trying to sound like someone who wasn't shaking inside. The taller man sneered. "Walk away, rich boy. This ain't your problem." But Sophia looked at him, then really looked tense. He saw fear flicker behind the stubbornness in her eyes. That was enough. Sirens wailed somewhere distant. Maybe someone had called. Maybe luck was on their side. The men cursed under their breath, disappearing into the night before the cops arrived. Adrian exhaled slowly, adrenaline roaring through his veins. "You okay?" he asked. Sophia nodded, shoulders tense. "I had it under control." He almost smiled. Clearly she hesitated, then added softly, "Thanks." It was the first time she'd said anything to him that didn't have edges. They walked toward the subway together, silence stretching between them, thick with things neither knew how to name. Adrian wanted to ask her 100 questions: why she worked so late, where she lived, what those men wanted, but he didn't. He just walked beside her until they reached the station. "This is me," she said finally, stopping at the steps. He nodded, hands in his pockets, rain dripping from his hair. "Good night, Sophia." For a moment, she looked like she might say something more, but then she turned, disappearing into the tunnel below, leaving him standing alone with the echo of her name in his chest. Adrian told himself it ended there. A strange night, a stranger girl. Nothing more, but as he walked back through the sleeping city, he knew he was lying to himself. The next morning, sunlight spilled across the Manhattan skyline like liquid gold, streaking between glass towers and washing over a city that never really slept. Adrian Cole sat at the edge of his king-sized bed in the penthouse suite he called home, staring at a half-empty glass of scotch he didn't remember pouring. He hadn't been able to sleep. Sophia. The name had followed him through the night like a melody he couldn't place, something soft yet stubborn threading through his thoughts. He told himself it was curiosity, gratitude, maybe, for the way the evening had ended. But if he was being honest, it was more than that. The girl behind the bar with tired eyes and a voice like quiet thunder, she hadn't smiled at him once, and yet she had left him restless, wondering why she didn't look at him the way everyone else did. Adrian was used to being noticed, admired, even envied. Sophia hadn't given him a second glance, and that made her unforgettable. He ran a hand through his hair, forcing himself into motion. He had meetings today, boardroom negotiations where millions would trade hands like poker chips. His father would expect him sharp, polished, calculating. But all through the morning, numbers blurred on contracts, voices droned in conference calls, and his father's sharp remarks about focus barely registered. Adrian kept seeing her turning toward the subway stairs, rain dripping from her hair. The way she'd said thanks like it wasn't a word she used often. By afternoon, he gave up pretending he didn't care. He found himself walking into the Golden Ember Lounge again. It was quieter now, sunlight filtering through tinted windows, dust motes drifting lazily above empty tables. Behind the bar she was there, black dress, sleeves rolled up, hair pulled back in that same no-nonsense knot. Her eyes flicked toward him briefly, unreadable. "You don't look like you need a drink this early," she said. "Maybe I need a conversation," he replied before he could stop himself. Sophia didn't answer right away. She finished stacking glasses, wiped her hands on a towel, and leaned against the counter like someone bracing for impact. "You're persistent," she said. "Finally guilty," he admitted. She studied him, dark eyes calm but curious now. "Why?" Adrian paused. No one ever asked him why. People usually wanted what: his time, his name, his father's money. But why? Suggested she thought there might be something worth understanding. "I don't know," he said honestly. "Maybe because you didn't look at me the way everyone else does." Something flickered across her face, amusement. Maybe disbelief. "And how's that?" "Like I'm a headline," he said. "Like my name matters more than I do." She didn't smile, but her gaze softened, just slightly. "I didn't even know your name," she said. He almost laughed. "Adrian." "Sophia," she said. Though he already knew, silence stretched, warm this time. Not sharp like last night. "Let me buy you coffee," he said impulsively. "I work here," she reminded him. "Then after," he said. "Whenever you're free." Sophia shook her head, but he thought he saw the corner of her mouth twitch like she was hiding a smile. "We'll see." That "we'll see" carried him through the day like sunlight breaking through clouds. It was 3 nights later when fate finally gave him a second chance. Adrian had just left a charity gala, the kind where champagne flowed like water and everyone smiled too wide for photographs. He spotted her across the street outside a small diner. Her uniform jacket pulled tight against the cold, hair loose around her shoulders this time. She was laughing with another waitress as they locked up for the night, sound soft against the city's hum. When the other girl left, Adrian crossed the street before he could second-guess himself. "You're stalking me now," Sophia said as he approached, though there was no real bite in her voice. "Coincidence," he said lightly, "unless you believe in fate." She gave him a look that said she didn't have time for poetry. "What do you want, Adrian?" He hesitated, suddenly unsure. He had been with women before, beautiful, complicated, glamorous women who fit neatly into his world. But standing here under buzzing streetlights with a girl who carried exhaustion in her shoulders and strength in her spine, he felt like a teenager again, words catching in his throat. "Coffee," he said finally. "Just coffee." Sophia studied him for a long moment. The city moved around them, cars hissing through puddles, late-night voices drifting from open windows, but the air between them held still. "There's a place around the corner," she said at last. "It's cheap." "Perfect," he said, and meant it. The cafe smelled of burnt espresso and vanilla syrup, the kind of place where students typed on battered laptops and old men read newspapers no one else bought anymore. They sat by the window, rain streaking the glass. Two mismatched lives colliding over chipped ceramic mugs. He learned she lived in a walk-up apartment in Queens, worked 2 jobs, took night classes when she could afford them. She learned his life was polished and empty in ways money couldn't hide. Somewhere between stories about childhood memories and complaints about Manhattan rent, Adrian realized he was leaning closer, drawn in by the way her hands moved when she talked, the warmth in her laugh when he admitted he couldn't cook anything but eggs. She wasn't impressed by him, not his last name, not the car waiting outside, not the world he came from. And that made him want her even more. When they left the cafe, the rain had stopped. The city glistened under street lamps, reflections stretching like promises across wet pavement. They stood at the corner where their paths split, her toward the subway, him toward his car. "Thanks for the coffee," she said. "Thanks for saying yes," he replied. Sophia hesitated, then met his gaze fully for the first time. There was something theirs, something quiet but electric, like the first spark before a storm. "Good night, Adrian." He watched her disappear down the subway steps, the echo of her voice lingering like a secret he wasn't ready to let go. That night, Adrian lay awake again, staring at the ceiling while the city roared far below. He told himself it was nothing, just curiosity, a passing distraction, but deep down, he knew better. Something had started, and he didn't think either of them could stop it now. The next week unfolded like something between accident and design. Adrian told himself he wasn't planning it, that he just happened to stop by the diner where Sophia worked evenings, or past the cafe where she sometimes studied with her laptop balanced between coffee cups. But even he knew that was a lie. There was something about her that unsettled him, stripped away layers he hadn't realized he was wearing. In a life measured by appointments and obligations, she felt unscripted, real, like the city itself, loud, relentless, alive with things you couldn't control. It wasn't that they talked much at first, a few minutes here, a coffee there, shared stories between ringing phones and the shuffle of her customers. He learned her father had left when she was 12, that she had a younger brother she sometimes worried about like a son, that she once wanted to be a photographer but life had bills to pay before dreams could even get a seat at the table. She learned almost nothing about him, not because he didn't talk, but because when he did, it sounded like someone else's biography. Private schools, summers in Italy, business degrees, luxury cars. Hearing it out loud made it all feel strangely hollow when set beside her world of secondhand jackets and midnight subway rides. It wasn't until Thursday night, sitting in that same small cafe with rain dripping outside again, that she looked at him across the table and said, "You don't actually like any of this, do you?" He blinked. "Any of what?" "The world you live in," she said simply. "The parties, the money, the people who smile too much. You look bored." Adrian almost laughed, because she wasn't wrong. But no one had ever said it like that before, like boredom was something visible on his skin. "It's complicated," he said finally. Sophia stirred her coffee, watching the swirl disappear. "It doesn't have to be," he didn't answer, because she was right, and he didn't know how to explain that everything about his life felt like a machine, running on someone else's blueprint. Outside, sirens wailed somewhere far off. Rain slicked the streets, painting the windows with streaks of neon. Inside, the air felt warm and close, the hum of conversation around them fading until he was aware only of her presence across the table. For the first time in longer than he could remember, Adrian wasn't thinking about tomorrow's meetings or his father's expectations, or the way people saw his last name before they saw him. He was just here, with her, and that scared him a little. The first spark came later that night. They were walking toward the subway, her stop first. As always, when a gust of wind tore down the street, cold enough to raise goosebumps, Sophia wrapped her jacket tighter, muttering something about Manhattan weather. Without thinking, Adrian shrugged off his coat and draped it around her shoulders. She froze mid-step, glancing at him. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to," he said simply. Her eyes held his for a second too long before she looked away. It was nothing, really. Just a coat, just a city street and two people walking too close, but the air between them changed after that, thicker somehow, charged with something neither wanted to name. A few days later, fate shoved them closer in a way neither could avoid. Adrian was at a downtown construction site, one of his father's many projects, walking the perimeter with an architect who spoke in numbers and deadlines. He was supposed to meet his father afterward for lunch at a restaurant so expensive it didn't even list prices, but when he got there, Victor Cole wasn't alone. Seated across the table was Sophia. For a moment, Adrian thought he was hallucinating. She looked different out of her uniform jeans, a simple blouse, hair loose around her shoulders, but it was her, and she looked as surprised to see him as he felt. Victor noticed nothing. He was busy lecturing someone on the phone about permits and profit margins. "What are you doing here?" Adrian asked when they were briefly alone. Sophia crossed her arms. "I work here sometimes." Lunch shift, of course she did, because why wouldn't the universe throw them into the same orbit over and over like some cosmic joke? When Victor finally hung up, Adrian introduced them quickly, though he wasn't sure why the idea made him uneasy. Victor Cole was polite in that distracted way powerful men often were with people they considered temporary. He thanked her for the service, barely looking at her twice. But Adrian noticed the way Sophia straightened when Victor spoke to him, the way her eyes sharpened, reading things between father and son that most people missed. She was too smart not to notice the tension there. Later, after Victor left, Adrian stayed behind while she cleared the table. "Your father," she said carefully. "He's intense." "That's one word for it," Adrian muttered. She glanced at him, something curious in her expression. "You don't like working with him?" He hesitated. Most people didn't ask questions like that. Most people assumed he wanted the empire, the money, the power. "I don't know what I want," he admitted, "but it's not this." For a moment she just looked at him like she was seeing past the suit, past the name, straight into the part of him even he didn't understand. And then she smiled, small, unexpected, like sunlight through clouds. "You should figure it out," she said softly, "before someone else decides for you." That night, he couldn't stop thinking about that smile. It wasn't flirtatious or calculated. It was real, the first one he'd seen from her, and it made something in his chest ache in a way money never could fix. Maybe that was why. When he found her outside the restaurant after her shift, he asked if she wanted to walk instead of heading straight home. They ended up by the river. City lights stretched across the water like constellations caught in motion. She told him about the photography class she used to take before rent and tuition forced her to quit. He told her about the time he almost moved to London just to get out from under his father's shadow but lost his nerve at the last minute. Somewhere between stories and laughter and the quiet rush of the river below, their shoulders brushed. Neither moved away, it wasn't planned. The way their hands found each other a few minutes later, it just happened. Warm skin against cold air, fingers lacing slowly like both were testing the weight of it. Neither said anything. They didn't need to when they finally reached her subway stop. She handed back his coat from the other night, lingering a second longer than necessary. "See you around, Adrian," she said, voice low. He nodded, but his heart was pounding in a way that told him this wasn't going to fade quietly. Not now, not anymore. The days that followed would slip into something neither of them could quite name. Adrian started rearranging his schedule, not that he admitted it out loud so he could accidentally pass the cafe where she sometimes sat after work, books spread out like barricades against the world. He told himself it was casual, coincidence even. But there was nothing casual about the way his chest eased when she looked up and didn't seem to mind him sitting across from her. Sophia didn't make it easy. She never flirted the way other women did. Never asked about his car or his last name. Never seemed impressed by the life people usually wanted from him before they even knew him. She was sharp, independent, carrying herself like someone who had learned early that you only relied on yourself because everyone else had their own storms to survive. And yet, slowly, she started letting him in. Not in big, sweeping ways. Little ones. The way she didn't stop him anymore when he walked her to the subway. The way her gaze softened when he made her laugh with some self-deprecating remark about growing up in penthouses and never learning how to do laundry properly. The way she told him, almost shyly, that she wrote things down, sometimes thoughts, pieces of stories, things she didn't want to forget. "You're right," he asked one night, genuinely curious. She shrugged. "Not really, just pieces of things. It doesn't matter." "Maybe it does," he said. She looked at him then, long and steady, like she didn't know what to do with someone who thought her scraps of words might be worth something. It was during one of those, the evenings that the first real crack in Adrian's world appeared. They were leaving the cafe together when his phone lit up with his father's name. Victor Cole didn't call, he summoned, and you didn't ignore him. Adrian almost didn't answer, but Sophia gave a small nod, like she understood this wasn't a man you kept waiting. "Where are you?" Victor's voice snapped through the line before Adrian could say hello. "Out," Adrian said flatly. "Out where?" Adrian hesitated, glancing at Sophia beside him. "Just out," Victor exhaled sharply, the kind of sound that carried more disappointment than anger. "You have a meeting tomorrow morning with Harrington about the West 34th deal. Don't be late." And Adrian tried to look like you care this time. The line went dead. Adrian slid the phone back into his pocket. Jaw tight. Sophia didn't say anything at first. Then, softly, "You don't like him much, do you?" Adrian gave a humorless laugh. "He likes results. Everything else is optional." She didn't press, and somehow that made him want to tell her more, but he didn't. Not yet. The next evening, Adrian showed up at the diner where she worked the late shift. It wasn't glamorous. Sticky tables, flickering neon sign, the smell of burnt coffee lingering in the air, but she looked almost surprised to see him sitting in a corner booth. "You're not really a burger and fries kind of guy," she said when she came over, pen poised above her notepad. "Maybe I want to be," he said. She gave him a look like she wasn't sure whether to laugh or roll her eyes. "Fine, but if you ordered the milkshake, I'm judging you," he grinned. "Strawberry, extra whipped cream." She shook her head, muttering something about rich boys and their choices. But he caught the small smile tugging at her mouth before she turned away. It became a pattern after that. Nights where he showed up just to sit in her section, ordering things he barely touched, staying until closing so he could walk her to the subway. They talked about everything and nothing: books she liked, places he'd traveled, the best pizza in Queens, why the city always smelled like rain in summer. And under all of it something kept building, not rushed, not obvious. Just there, the way their shoulders brushed when they walked too close, the way his hand sometimes hovered near hers on the table like he was testing the air before breaking the space between them. The way her laughter lingered in his head long after he went home to a penthouse that suddenly felt too big, too cold, too empty. One Friday night, the diner was nearly empty when she slid into the booth across from him during her break, stealing one of his fries without asking. "You're terrible at this," she said out of nowhere. He raised an eyebrow. "At what?" "Small talk. You always look like you're thinking about something else." "Maybe I'm thinking about you," he said before he could stop himself. She blinked, caught off guard. Then, slowly, "That's a dangerous thing to say." "Why?" "Because I might believe you." The air between them shifted, then quiet but heavy, like the pause before a storm breaks. Adrian leaned forward slightly, heart hammering harder than it should. "Maybe you should." For a moment, neither of them moved. Outside headlights smeared across wet pavement, the city carrying on around them like this moment didn't matter at all. But it did. She looked away first, standing abruptly as another customer walked in. "Your milkshake's melting," she said over her shoulder, voice steady but not entirely convincing. When she closed the diner that night, he was still waiting. They walked side by side toward the subway, silence thick but not uncomfortable. At the corner where they usually said goodnight, she stopped suddenly, turning to face him. "Why do you keep doing this?" she asked softly. "Doing what?" "Showing up, walking me home, saying things like that." He met her gaze without flinching. "Because I want to." "That's not an answer, it's the only one I have." For a moment she just stood there, rain starting to fall in fine, misty threads around them. Then, quietly, "You shouldn't want things you can't keep." Adrian, he didn't know what she meant about him, about her, about the whole fragile thing between them, but before he could ask, she was already turning toward the subway steps, disappearing into the glow below. Adrian stood there long after she was gone, rain soaking through his coat, wondering when exactly this stopped being simple, wondering why he didn't care that it had. The next week didn't unfold the way Adrian expected. He kept replaying her words in his head. "You shouldn't want things you can't keep." He didn't know if she meant him, or herself, or this whole impossible thing blooming between them when neither had asked for it. Maybe all three, but he also knew he wasn't ready to let go, so he kept showing up, sometimes at the diner, sometimes at the cafe, sometimes just walking her to the subway without saying much at all. And little by little, he felt the edges of her start to soften. Not in obvious ways, Sophia was too guarded for that, but in the quiet things. The way she didn't flinch when his hand brushed hers by accident. The way she started telling him things she hadn't before. Like how she wanted to travel one day, or how she used to climb onto the roof of her building as a kid just to watch the city lights. "You ever feel like you're meant for something bigger?" she asked one night as they leaned against the railing by the river. "The water black and restless below all the time," he said. And I still don't know what it is," he admitted. She gave a small, crooked smile. "Maybe that's the point. Maybe you're supposed to figure it out." He wanted to tell her that lately. She was the only thing that felt real in a life full of things that looked perfect but weren't. But he didn't. Not yet. The first real crack came the following weekend. Adrian had almost convinced himself things could stay like this, quiet, uncomplicated, something only theirs. But then his father found out. Victor Cole didn't ask questions when he wanted answers. He demanded them. It happened at the worst possible time, a Monday afternoon meeting in the glass-walled conference room high above Midtown, sunlight flashing off skyscrapers like knives. Adrian was flipping through reports when Victor said casually, "Who's the girl?" Adrian froze. "What girl?" "The one you've been wasting time with instead of focusing on this company," Victor said, eyes sharp as the edge of a blade. "Someone saw you together." More than once, Adrian kept his expression neutral, though his pulse thudded harder. "Her name's Sophia." Victor leaned back in his chair, voice cool. "And what exactly do you think you're doing with a waitress from Queens?" Something in the way he said it made Adrian's jaw tighten. "Talking to her. Getting to know her. That's all." Victor gave a humorless laugh. "You think women like that want you? They want the name, the money. Don't be naive, Adrian. It makes you look weak." Adrian slammed the folder shut harder than necessary. "You don't know anything about her, and you don't know anything about the real world," Victor snapped. "You think she cares about you. The second she realizes who you are, she wants what everyone else does. Access, security, a ticket out." "She's not like that," Adrian said flatly. Victor gave him a look that carried years of empire building and cynicism. "They're all like that." Adrian left the office before the meeting even ended. He didn't remember the elevator ride down or the cab back to his place. All he could hear was his father's voice, smooth and cold, like the world was some rigged game only Victor knew how to win. And maybe it was, but that night, when he saw Sophia outside the cafe waiting for the bus, hair tucked under her hood against the wind, Adrian knew one thing for certain. His father was wrong about her. He had to be. They ended up walking again, because that was what they did now. "Long day?" she asked as they cut through a quiet street lined with flickering lampposts. "You have no idea," he said. She glanced at him, reading something in his shoulders. "Want to talk about it?" "Not really." She nodded like she understood that too. They walked in silence for a while, the city a low hum around them. Somewhere a saxophone played from an open window, notes drifting through the night like smoke. Finally Adrian stopped under a streetlight, turning to face her. "My father thinks you're after my money." Sophia blinked, caught off guard. "What he thinks you're just waiting for whatever you can get out of me." For a second, her face stayed unreadable. Then she let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "That's rich. He doesn't know you," Adrian said quickly. "Clearly," she muttered. "Because if he did, he'd know I've been paying my own rent since I was 16. I don't need saving, Adrian, especially not by someone who thinks I'm waiting for a handout." "I don't think that," he said firmly. She looked at him then, really looked like she was weighing something. "Good, because I don't want your money." "I didn't say you did." "You didn't have to," she said quietly. For a moment they just stood there under the buzzing streetlight, words hanging between them like too much rain in the air. They kept walking after that, slower this time. At the subway entrance, she stopped, pulling his coat tighter around her shoulders like she didn't want to give it back yet. You shouldn't care what he thinks, she said finally. He's my father, Adrian said. So it's not that simple. She studied him for a long moment. Maybe it should be. And then she turned, heading down the stairs before he could answer. Adrian didn't sleep that night. He lay awake staring at the ceiling, city lights bleeding through the blinds, wondering why it mattered so much that she hadn't denied caring about him, but also hadn't said she did. The next evening he found her again, this time at the river, where she sometimes went after work to sit on the cold concrete ledge and watch the water like it might give her answers. She didn't look at him when he sat down beside her. Why do you keep showing up? She asked softly. Because I want to, he said again. She shook her head like that wasn't enough. You don't even know me, Adrian. Then tell me, he said. Tell me what I should know. She hesitated, then said, I don't trust people easily. Why not? Because people leave, she said simply. Or they want something, or both. He didn't say anything for a long time. Then, quietly, I'm not going anywhere. She turned to look at him then, eyes dark and searching like she didn't know whether to believe him for the first time. He thought maybe she wanted to. They didn't kiss that night, but when they walked back through the empty streets, their hands brushed again. This time neither of them pulled away. The night after the river conversation, Adrian knew things were shifting, though he couldn't quite name how. Maybe it was the way she'd looked at him when he said he wasn't going anywhere, like she wanted to believe him but wasn't sure she should. Maybe it was the way she didn't give his coat back until 3 days later, folded neatly like she was pretending it didn't mean something that she had kept it that long. Or maybe it was just the simple fact that he couldn't stop thinking about her. She was in his head during board meetings, during late-night calls with investors, during dinners where his father spoke about profit margins like they were gospel, and Adrian's mind wandered to the sound of her laugh. Instead, he told himself it was nothing, a distraction at most. But he was lying, and he knew it. It was Wednesday when the first real storm hit Manhattan, wind whipping off the river and rain pounding hard enough to turn the streets into mirrors. Adrian left the office late, tie loosened, coat collar turned up against the weather. He wasn't planning to see her tonight, but his feet took him to the diner anyway. Through the rain-streaked windows, he saw her moving between tables with practiced efficiency, hair pulled back, apron tied at the waist. She didn't see him at first. When she finally did, surprise flickered across her face before she masked it with something neutral. You're going to ruin those shoes, she said when he slid into his usual booth, water dripping from his coat. Maybe I like the rain, he said, or maybe you're lost. Maybe I was, he said softly. Something in her expression shifted then, like she heard the weight under his words. The diner emptied out before closing, leaving only the hum of the soda machine and the rain thrumming against the windows. She brought him coffee without asking, sitting across from him for the first time since that night by the river. You always look like you're carrying the whole world around, she said after. Well, maybe I am, he admitted. Then maybe you should put it down for a minute. He almost smiled. And do what instead? I don't know, something reckless. Like what? Like she hesitated, then shrugged. Let someone in the air between them went still. Adrian's hand rested on the table, close enough to hers that he felt the warmth radiating across the space. Maybe I want to, he said finally. Sophia looked at him then, eyes steady, searching. Then maybe you should. They didn't talk much after that. When she closed the diner, he walked her to the subway like always, rain softening to mist around them. At the entrance, she stopped but didn't turn right away. For a moment they just stood there, the city rushing by in cars and voices and wind. Then, slowly, like it wasn't planned, she reached for his hand. It was small, simple, fingers sliding between his like it was the most natural thing in the world. She didn't say anything, neither did he, but Adrian knew something had shifted again, something he couldn't undo even if he wanted to. 2 nights later, his father noticed. Victor Cole wasn't the kind of man who asked questions lightly. When he did, they came sharp as glass. I hear you've been spending time with her again, Victor said during dinner at the penthouse, voice casual in the way grenades sometimes look harmless before they explode. Adrian didn't bother pretending. Yeah, Victor set down his glass with a soft click. I told you what would happen if you got distracted. From what? Adrian asked. Making more money we don't need. Building towers nobody lives in. Victor's eyes narrowed. From becoming what you're supposed to be. Adrian laughed, humorless. And what's at you? Silence stretched sharp between them. You think she cares about you? Victor asked finally. She cares about what you can give her, that's all. She hasn't asked me for anything, Adrian said coldly. She doesn't have to, Victor replied. People like that never do. They let you give it freely until you forget it was yours to begin with. Adrian shoved back from the table, appetite gone. You don't know her. Victor's voice followed him out. I don't have to. I know how this ends. But Adrian didn't leave for the penthouse balcony like usual. He left for the diner. It was nearly closing when he got there. Sophia looked surprised to see him again, rain clinging to his hair like he'd come straight from a storm. Rough night? She asked lightly. You could say that. She poured him coffee, sliding into the booth across from him when the last customer left. For a while they just sat there, steam curling between them, rain tapping at the windows. "Do you believe people can surprise you?" he asked finally. Sophia tilted her head. "Sometimes, even if everyone else thinks they won't." She studied him, something softening in her eyes. "What happened?" "Nothing," he said. "Everything she didn't push." And that alone made him want to tell her everything his father had said, but instead he asked, "Do you ever get tired of people deciding who you are before you even speak?" Her laugh was quiet, humorless, all the time. He nodded, staring into his coffee. "Yeah, me too." When she closed the diner, they walked again. The streets were slick with rain, neon lights smearing across pavement, taxis hissing past like restless animals. Halfway to the subway, Adrian stopped under a streetlight, the same one where she'd told him he shouldn't want things he couldn't keep. Only this time, he reached for her hand first. She didn't pull away at the subway steps. She turned to face him, rain dripping from the edge of her hood. "You look like you're about to say something," she said. "Maybe I am," he said. "Then say it." He hesitated, heart hammering harder than it should. But before he could speak, a train roared below, wind rushing up the stairs, and the moment slipped away like everything else in his life lately seemed to. "Good night, Sophia," he said instead. She looked at him for a long moment before nodding slowly. "Good night, Adrian." Neither of them moved right away, and maybe that said everything neither of them was ready to say out loud yet. Adrian didn't see Sophia for 2 days after that night outside the subway. Part of it was work meetings, stacked on meetings, his father snapping orders like someone trying to build an empire fast enough to outrun the clock. But part of it was him needing to breathe, to sort through the noise in his head before he drowned in it, because something had changed between them. He felt it in the way her hand lingered in his that night, the way she'd looked at him under the streetlight like she was waiting for words he hadn't been able to say. He wasn't good at this. Business deals, negotiations, walking into a room full of people twice his age and walking out with their signatures on contracts that he could do. But Sophia wasn't a contract. She wasn't something to win, and that scared him in a way nothing else ever had. On the third day, he found her at the cafe, sitting by the window with her laptop open, rain streaking down the glass behind her like the city couldn't stop crying. She looked up when he walked in. "You disappeared," she said, voice even but eyes searching. "Work," he said, and life, she repeated, like the word tasted different in her mouth. He slid into the chair across from her. "I wanted to see you." Something flickered across her face before she looked back at her laptop. "You were seeing me." It wasn't cold, just guarded. He wanted to tell her about his father, about the way Victor had said she'd want something from him eventually, about how Adrian wasn't sure why it mattered so much that she DID'd in single quotes T. instead. He asked, "Do you ever feel like you're living 2 lives at once?" She glanced at him. "All the time." They ended up walking again after she closed her laptop, the city swallowing them whole the way it always did. This time, though, she told him things he hadn't known before, about her mother working 2 jobs when Sophia was a kid, about the brother she practically raised herself, about how sometimes she felt like life was a treadmill, set too fast and she was always 2 steps from falling. He listened, really listened, and when she finally stopped talking, he said quietly, "I wish you didn't have to carry all that alone." She looked at him then, eyes soft in a way that made his chest ache. "What makes you think I do?" "Because you look like someone who never gets to fall apart," he almost said. But she was already walking again, and the moment passed. The turning point came a week later. Adrian had just left. Another argument with his father, this one about the future of the company, about responsibility, about how Adrian needed to stop playing games with his life. Victor didn't say Sophia's name, but it was there, heavy between every word. Adrian left before he said something he couldn't take back. He found Sophia outside the diner, waiting for the bus in the cold. "Come with me," he said. She frowned. "Where?" "Anywhere." She hesitated, then shook her head. "I have work in the morning, called in sick. I don't do that." "Just this once," he said, surprising even himself with how badly he needed her to say yes. They ended up on the Brooklyn Bridge at midnight, city lights blazing around them like the whole world was on fire. Wind whipped at her hair, carried the sound of taxis below, the distant rush of the river far beneath their feet. "Why here?" she asked, hugging his coat tighter around her shoulders. "Because I wanted to see the city from somewhere it can't touch us," he said. She didn't answer right away. Then, quietly, "Adrian, what are we doing?" He turned to her, heart pounding. "Something I can't seem to stop." Her eyes searched his, like she was looking for the catch, the warning, the reason to turn around before it was too late. But he didn't give her one. They didn't kiss right away. They just stood there, side by side, watching the city blaze like it was daring them to look away first. Then, slowly, like gravity finally had enough, she turned toward him. The wind whipped between them and he kissed her. It wasn't rushed, it wasn't planned, it was just everything he hadn't been able to say about his father, about her, about the way she made his world feel less like a cage and more like air. When they finally pulled apart, she didn't step back. Her hand stayed in his, fingers tight like she wasn't ready to let go. "Adrian," she said softly, warning and want tangled together. "I know," he said, but he didn't let go either. They walked back through the city long after midnight, Silence, thick but not heavy. At her subway stop, she lingered again, like she wanted to say something but didn't know how. "Good night," she said finally. "Good night," he said. Neither moved then. Almost reluctantly, she stepped back, disappearing into the tunnel below. Adrian stood there long after she was gone, the taste of her kiss still on his lips, the city roaring around him like it didn't care about any of it, but he did, and that terrified him more than anything else. The morning after the kiss, Adrian woke to sunlight streaming across the penthouse windows, painting the floor in long golden stripes. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like he was waking up to another day of obligations and empty conversations, but reality never stayed quiet for long. By noon, his father was waiting for him in the office, expression carved from stone. "I heard about last night," Victor said. Adrian didn't ask how. Victor always knew things before he should. "She's not your future," Victor continued. "She's a distraction, and you're about to throw everything away for it." Adrian met his father's gaze, something settling in his chest like steel cooling into shape. "Maybe I don't want the future you planned for me." Victor's eyes hardened. "You're my son. That name means something. Maybe I want it to mean something else," Adrian said. Silence filled the space between them. Sharp and final. Victor didn't argue after that. He didn't have to. The line had been drawn. Adrian left before the day ended, needing air, needing space, needing her. He found Sophia after her shift, waiting for the bus again, city lights painting her face in broken golden shadow. "You look like you haven't slept," she said softly. "Probably haven't," he admitted. She studied him for a moment, then crossed her arms. "What happened?" "My father," he said simply. "He wants me to choose." "Between what?" "Between the life he wants and everything else." Her eyes didn't waver. "And which one are you choosing?" Adrian didn't answer right away. The city roared around them, taxis and sirens and 100 conversations blurring into one restless hum. Finally, he said, "I don't know, but I know I don't want to lose you." Sophia's breath caught almost imperceptibly. "Adrian, this isn't a game for me, I know," he said quietly. They walked that night without a destination, past shuttered storefronts and late-night bodegas, past the smell of roasted peanuts from a street vendor closing up for the evening, past the places that had started to feel like landmarks in whatever this was between them at the river. They stopped, wind curled around them, carrying the scent of rain-soaked concrete and distant gasoline. "I've spent my whole life doing what's expected," Adrian said finally. "School, business, money, all of it lined up like dominoes someone else set in place. And now," she asked, "now I think I want something that's mine." Her eyes searched his, cautious and unsteady. "You don't even know what that means yet." "Maybe not," he admitted, "but I know it starts with you." She looked away then, out at the black water sliding past under the city lights. "I don't need saving," she said, quietly. "I'm not trying to save you," he said. "I think you might be the one saving me." The words surprised even him, but they felt true the second they left his mouth. Sophia's shoulders rose and fell like she was carrying the weight of things she didn't want to say. Finally she whispered, "You don't know what my life is like, Adrian. You get to walk away from things. I don't." "Then maybe I don't want to walk away," he said. The turning point came 2 nights later. Victor Cole summoned Adrian to the penthouse, the city burning in gold and glass behind him. "I spoke to the board," Victor said without preamble. "About the future. About you." Adrian waited. "They think you're distracted," Victor continued, "unfocused, not ready to lead anything worth the Cole name." Adrian almost laughed. "Because of her. Because of you," Victor snapped. "Because you can't separate real life from responsibility." Adrian's jaw tightened. "Maybe they're the same thing." Victor stared at him like he was speaking another language. "You're going to throw everything away for a waitress." "No," Adrian said. "I'm throwing away your version of everything for a chance at mine." He left before Victor could answer. And for the first time in his life, Adrian didn't feel like running from something. He felt like running to something that he found Sophia at the cafe this time, laptop closed, mug empty, like she was waiting for the world to tell her what came next. Instead, Adrian told her. "My father thinks I'm walking away from the company," he said. "Are you?" she asked softly. "I'm walking toward you," he said. Sophia blinked, startled, like she hadn't expected him to say it out loud. "Adrian, I don't know what comes after this," he admitted. "I don't know what I'm supposed to want anymore, except this your life that feels like mine, not his." Her hands curled around the edge of the table. "And what if I'm not what you think I am? Then at least it's my choice," he said. The city felt like it was holding its breath that night when they walked again, the two of them moving through streets washed clean by rain. At the river, where it had all started, Adrian finally stopped. The wind whipped around them. The water rushed below. "I don't want to keep waiting for my life to start," he said. She didn't answer right away. Then, slowly, "You think I do?" He shook his head. "I think maybe we stop waiting together." Her eyes searched his in the glow of the streetlights, dark and uncertain and wanting all at once, and then she kissed him first. This time it wasn't like the one on the bridge. This one was certain. Like neither of them wanted to leave any room for what anymore. When they pulled apart, her forehead rested against his, breath trembling between them. Adrian, she whispered. Yeah, don't make me regret this. Then don't let go, he said. They stood there a long time, the city blazing around them, the river rushing below, the whole world carrying on like nothing had changed. But for them, everything had. Weeks later, when Adrian told his father he was stepping back from the company, Victor didn't yell, didn't argue. He just looked at his son like he didn't recognize him anymore. Maybe he didn't. Adrian didn't. He cared about the girl waiting for him outside the diner that night, hands shoved in her pockets against the wind, eyes softening when she saw him. He cared about the life that suddenly felt like it belonged to him for the first time. And when he reached for Sophia's hand, fingers lacing through hers as they walked toward the river again, he knew he wasn't looking back. Not now, not ever. If you loved Adrian and Sophia's passionate journey, rate this story from 0 to 10 in the comments and subscribe for more unforgettable tales of love, desire, and second chances.